Much of the same we've been talking about here, just that the cost benefit, there's no way that it comes together. You can't make an argument that it works in any situation. And then also we have currently where USDA and Fannie and Freddie, USDA has already passed this, that they are going to make houses starting in 2025 be built under this code if you want to do USDA financing. And then Fannie and Freddie Mac were looking to do the same provisions. So we were making a strong plea that, if you do that, that basically makes for a national energy code, which we in no way want. It needs to be more of a local level. But yeah, if Fannie and Freddie pass that you have to build the house under the 21 energy code to get financing from their agencies, 60 to 70% of the financing in this country is done through those organizations. So it could be forcing areas, in Missouri, we have many areas that don't have local building codes.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential. And here's your host, Jeff Crank.
Well, thanks for joining us on another episode of American Potential. We talk all the time about the laws that get passed, and people think they don't have an impact, but they do. And today, we're going to talk about something that really is impacted by a federal law. So home, as you know, your home, it's more than just a building, but it's a place where memories are made, from having family get-togethers to baby's first steps to birthday celebrations and to holidays. Now, for the first-time home buyer, the hope is to find a space that meets their needs in a price range that they can afford. For buyers looking at new construction, builders work on offering different options in a variety of price ranges to find a home that works with the buyer's budget. After the home buyer decides which layout they like, if construction hasn't started yet, it could take, on average, 7 to 8 months for the home to be built. But in Kansas City, due to the city taking funds from the Inflation Reduction Act, it's now taking longer to build a home, and the new energy regulations have added additional cost, pushing some buyers out of the market. Not only have these new regulations affected the price, but also the approval process for permitting. So, what are these added costs, and why are these new standards slowing down the permitting process? I want to welcome Shawn Woods, who's a builder in Kansas City, to talk about what the process has been like under these new regulations. Shawn, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, affordable housing. I mean, that's just one of the things that everybody over the last couple of years has been talking about. Obviously, we see the inflation that's hit the United States. And again, caused by bad government decisions. That's what causes inflation. Too much money chasing too few goods in an economy. But in addition, that's driven up the cost of housing. But here we're talking about some things that have driven it up that really didn't need to. These are additional regulations that are put on. But before we get into all of that, I want to talk to you about the building industry. How'd you get into the building business, and how many years have you been doing it?
Well, I got it. My father was actually in the building business, and I came through high school and worked through him a little bit in the summers and things, and basically came out of high school and said I didn't want anything to do with the business. And it was kind of the same way. He said, stay out of the building business. It's not a fun business to be in. So I went off to college and worked at the Federal Reserve Bank for a couple of years, and then worked at another private company for a couple of years. But the building industry is one of those things that it kind of gets in your blood. And after you have the freedom to be outside and see the success of something going from nothing to something and providing somebody a new home, it's pretty exciting to be in. So after 4 or 5 years of that, I decided to come back and join him in his company in 1999. So been at it now a little bit over 25 years, and I established Ashler Homes on my own in 2011. So a little over 13 or 14 years on my own.
That's great. That's great. Talk about entry-level homes, right? And why they're important in any community, not just your community, but any community. Why are entry-level homes so important?
There's so many reasons they're important, but my company, Ashler Homes, that's kind of our focus, is that entry-level home, whatever that might be for new construction. But I feel like an entry level home, for one, is, the home is still the biggest wealth builder for our country, typically. So the faster we can get a young person in a home into home ownership, obviously the faster they begin to build that wealth. And I think the one thing that people miss a lot of times is the housing system or housing economics it's a large system, and you have to have people coming in as buyers in that entry level to feed the system up the chain. So, a more expensive house or a luxury home, they're not going to have a buyer if they don't have somebody coming in at the bottom of the market in the entry level and starting their wealth building and starting to move up and build their home and build their wealth to where they can move up into something more expensive, into a nicer neighborhood and things like that. And then, finally, I feel like home ownership obviously brings just a more stable community in my mind. When people are bought into the community, they're bought into the school districts, they're bought into the businesses around the community and things like that. When they're a homeowner, they're bought into that for a much longer period, and they're also just feel like they're more committed when they're an owner, instead of a renter that can move from place to place much easier.
Well, and that's so true. And as we talk about, you talked about the importance for many people that this is the creation of wealth, right? For many people, that first home they buy, it's where they get into the market. It's where they start investing really with their future. And so many people maybe use that, and they have equity in that home, can use that equity for other things, to either invest or to, take that equity and go on to a bigger home, those sorts of things. It really is a starting point for many Americans, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's the spot that, the earlier on in life we can get people into that starting point. I just feel like the more opportunities they're going to have in the future in the housing industry, but also just, in business or in pulling wealth and equity out to start a business, et cetera.
Right. So now Kansas City had to adopt new energy standards because of the Inflation Reduction Act. Now tell us why they had to adopt these new energy standards, and what are some of those energy standards? How do they add cost to the construction of a home?
Yeah. So Kansas City was contemplating passing the 21 IECC before they tried to take the funds from the IRA, and then that was kind of the thing that pushed them over the edge when the grant funds became available. That became their full push to adopt the new codes. And in hindsight, they're not going to end up getting any funds out of it, just because of how the funds are being distributed and timeliness of that, et cetera. So they've passed a code now that they're not going to see any funds out of, or if they do, it's going to be very, very minimal. But in the Midwest, we had in the past, obviously stayed up with codes. We were on the 2018 code here in Kansas City, Missouri, and we had made small adjustments inside the energy, but we had for a long time been able to amend out most of the energy provisions in the code, just because we feel like that the energy provisions in the code are more considered stretch codes. Those are things that the housing buyer should have a choice of whether they want to do it or not. It shouldn't be forced on them to do it. But the 21 IECC, when Casey Mo did it, it had to be adopted in order to get the grant funds. It had to be adopted unamended. So there could be no changes to the code whatsoever. And that was a huge shock to the system here, when we had for a long time amended things out of the code, and then you go to a non-amended code. You're talking about costs upwards of, in some instances, $25,000 to $30,000 extra per house to save some energy on that, on the cost of that house. And I built a little bit smaller house than typical in Kansas City, so my additional cost to the buyer are coming in at $12,000 to $15,000 extra a house. So in this case, we have houses being built within Kansas City, Missouri proper that are $12,000 to $15,000 higher than houses just on the other side of the city, because it wasn't metro wide. It was just Kansas City, Missouri proper that adopted that.
Yeah. So, and this is what's, I think, very important to understand, for people to understand as they're listening to this, is, there is a cost to these kinds of decisions, these new energy standards. that the city chose to adopt, or, I mean, at some point the federal government sort of held a gun to them and said, you will adopt these if you want these funds, but they seemed like they were headed this way anyway. But there is a cost to them. And this is a tale that maybe all municipalities around the country ought to think through. Lots of people make these kinds of decisions, but there is an impact, and there's a real world impact to families who are trying to make ends meet at a time, as I opened this podcast up, talking about, they're paying more for gas, they're paying more for groceries, they're paying more for insurance, all these things. And then now, in order to get in a home, they have to pay $15,000 to $30,000 more because of a decision by a government to institute this new standard, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's, when we look at where housing is at today and how expensive it is, I mean, I don't have exact numbers to put on this, but I do believe that a lot of the run up in housing cost in the last 10 to 15 years is due to government intervention of some sort, like stream setback ordinances and the 21 energy codes, and just all the provisions that keep happening inside of housing, of how a street is built, the stormwater requirements. I mean, they just keep adding on top of each other and compounding more and more to where housing is unaffordable when we're done.
Yeah. And as we talk about issues, like affordability, and that's one thing, and it always surprises me, the same people who are trying to drive up the cost on energy through these mandates and things are the same people that complain about the, housing affordability, right? But they're the ones causing the problem. I mean, generally, if you just let the free market work and you let choice happen and let consumers decide whether they want these new standards put into their home or not. I mean, they may save some money down the road on energy costs, but that should be a choice they make, not the government forcing it on them. Do you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We've had, energy upgrades available to our customers for years now, 8 to 10 years. And it was always surprising how few of people chose them. And a lot of that is because houses that are being built today without the energy codes are well above the energy efficiency of the houses built just 5 to 10 years ago, just because of advancements in technology and requirements of the EPA and other items that have to be upgraded in the house. So, yeah, I mean, if customers weren't choosing it on their own, now it's being forced down their throat and raising the price of the house for something that they didn't choose before when it was an option to them.
Yeah. Shawn, how do we connect people to this? They're probably mad at you as the builder, right? Like, well, how come it costs so much for this house when it's really not you, right? You're just having to build obviously it costs more for you to build information because you are a home, because you've got so much to deal with and to put into this house, whether it's materials or things like that. But in addition to that, you now have these things that government are doing that are driving up the cost of the home. How do we connect the home buyer to the fact that these are politicians and the decisions that politicians are making that are driving up the cost of these homes?
Yeah, I think that's a discussion that I've done a few interviews lately, and at the end of the interview, they're always like, did I miss anything? And I always say, yeah, you need to tell people that they need to get involved. They need to be made aware of what's going on in their local governments, because I think a lot of times these choices are being made by the government, and they're being pressured by groups that are extremely well funded. And they lose sight of the fact of, hey, these things have implications. Yes, you want the house to be energy efficient, but you can't make it energy efficient to the point that somebody can't afford it. And that's, it seems like by the time it gets to that point, people have lost track of the fact that their government officials are making these decisions without going to ask the consumer what they want. They're not going to ask the home builder how much it's going to cost, because they're getting so much pressure from outside groups to make these improvements.
Yeah, right. Well, and there's other ways in which government's already driving this. The cost of energy has been being driven up by, renewable standards and things like that are causing, the utility bill already to go up. And, families are facing that. But in addition to that, they're facing these kinds of standards. And it's just frustrating, I think, for the average citizen. They don't, unless they're paying attention, they don't understand what's driving all of this. They're just frustrated by the fact that a new house may cost them this amount. Do cities seem to take pause on this? Like you said, the city that has done this here, where Kansas City proper has done it, but there are suburbs outside that haven't, and are houses cheaper in those suburbs?
They are, and they're easier to bring to market as well, just because jumping the hurdles that are there on the 21 IECC obviously are a little harder to navigate as well. So it is amazing though when you go to a city council meeting, or even you go to the state legislature and things like that. It's like in one discussion in the agenda is affordable housing and how desperately affordable housing is needed, and then 5 minutes later they'll be talking about something else that has a huge impact on affordable housing, and they typically vote not in conjunction with or pushing towards affordable housing, which always blows my mind. It's like they either don't make the connection, or the discussion of affordable housing is more just a lip service, and then they all push towards the other direction.
Well, and it's the same people, right? It's the same people who are saying we've got to have affordable housing, we have to have affordable housing, who are also saying we have to change these energy standards. It's like they just don't make the connection. Free markets make the connection, but often politicians don't do that. Is there an effort in Kansas City to repeal any of these standards?
Yeah, actually, right now I was right before our phone call. I was on a phone call with our HBA president here that they're trying to get an ordinance passed to, get a little relief both on what it takes to actually permit the house in Kansas City, Missouri, under this new code, which has been extremely cumbersome, but also roll back some of the provisions to a less stringent HERS score, and a HERS score is a way of rating the house and how energy efficient it is. So hopefully we'll find out this week if that's going to be successful or not, because it has put a huge strain on supply inside Kansas City, Missouri. I mean, they should have pulled, by this time of year, they should have pulled about 800 permits, and they've pulled about 350 so far. So they're really behind on permits, and all of that can be contributed to builders, bringing their plans up to speed, but also exiting the market and going to municipalities that are surrounding KCMO where they don't have to abide by those codes.
Yeah. So are these the most stringent standards you've ever seen in all your time being in the building business?
Yes. And it, like I said earlier, it contains not only just energy codes, but just codes themselves, and provisions of how to build neighborhoods and things just continue to get more and more cumbersome to where they all affect the price of the house. But yes, this is definitely the most energy efficient we've been having to build houses. We actually built, we got the first house through for an occupancy under the new code. And we just so happened to have the exact same house next door to it that we built under the old code. So we went in and had it tested. We asked that customer if we could go test it, and cost the new customer $12,000 to build the new floor plan. And the energy savings for them from a third party energy rater was $125 a year. So there is no payback. I mean, you can't even argue there is a payback sometime. It never pays back for the customer to spend that much money to save $125 in annual energy.
Yeah, but it does make politicians feel good about themselves. That's one benefit, I suppose. I mean, it's lunacy for us to not do cost benefit analysis on things like that. And that's just such a shining example of how messed up things can be. And then these new codes stall the building process, right? I mean, it's taking longer now from when somebody says, okay, I want to build a home, to when it's actually finished and they can move in.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. We have customers that have bought 2 or 3 months ago that we still don't have the permit on their house, because we're going through the steps of trying to get the plans approved through this municipality. And something that we started back in, I guess, October of last year. We had to go back and redraw all of our floor plans to meet this new code. And so, as a company, we've spent about $150,000 in architect fees, and just the timeliness of, we're 8 months in now, and we are still trying to get approvals on some of our plans to get them through the system. So yeah, it's taking much, much longer to get houses under construction for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you gave that example, people who are in favor of these new codes are basically saying that it saves you money over time, but you're just not seeing that. I mean, you gave that one example. Are homeowners, what are homeowners' thoughts on this? Are they upset, obviously, that they have to pay more? And do you explain to them why that it's this code?
Yes, we show them what all they're getting in the house extra. I mean, many of them have asked, can I take that stuff out? And we say, yes, you can, but you have to move somewhere else outside of Kansas City proper. Otherwise, you have to build it like this. So, yeah, homeowners don't want it. I mean, like I said, we offered those for many years as options, and they were never taken. So, yeah, they often question why the cost is so high or why it's gone up so much so quickly. And we have to explain to them what all is now included in the house that wasn't before. And then when you show them, how much they're going to save annually, they start to ask, like, well, this doesn't make any sense. And, you can't really explain it to them, but it is unfortunate that it is what it is.
Yeah. Now, you were able to testify in the House Subcommittee on Energy, Climate, and Grid Security. What did you tell lawmakers when you testified?
Much of the same we've been talking about here, just that the cost benefit, there's no way that it comes together. You can't make an argument that it works in any situation. And then also we have currently where USDA and Fannie and Freddie, USDA has already passed this, that they are going to make houses starting in 2025 be built under this code if you want to do USDA financing. And then Fannie and Freddie Mac were looking to do the same provisions. So we were making a strong plea that, if you do that, that basically makes for a national energy code, which we in no way want. It needs to be more of a local level. But yeah, if Fannie and Freddie pass that you have to build the house under the 21 energy code to get financing from their agencies, 60 to 70% of the financing in this country is done through those organizations. So it would be forcing areas, in Missouri, we have many areas that don't have local building codes, but they would be mandated if they want to use USDA financing, which is used in many cases in those rural areas. They would have to build to the 21 energy code, which is something they've never done. I mean, they don't even have building inspectors in the area or energy raters in the area that can even, take that on, for one, and for two, the extra added cost there where they don't have building codes it'd be huge.
Yeah. And so frustrating that, this is the way the federal government oftentimes works. They get control of the financing system because, many of the financing mechanisms, the banking mechanisms that mortgage companies use are government funded financing. So then they start writing the rules, and these rules they can use to do these sorts of things. Is there any hope that we can stop this? I mean, obviously this is the Biden administration that's pushing this right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like we said earlier, just people getting involved and educating themselves on what the government is doing behind the scenes on items like this, and starting to, it seems like the people that have the craziest ideas of what should and shouldn't be in houses seem to scream the loudest. And we need to start making our voices heard of, that we don't want these higher costs in our housing. We want houses that actually future generations can afford, instead of, making them zero dependent on energy, but you can't afford it. We'd rather, be able to afford it and actually pay some energy bills if needed. But yeah, I think people get involved and just, starting to make our voices heard that we want the government to stay out of housing and let the local municipalities do that.
Well, and you raised a good point. This may create essentially a national building code. We certainly don't want that. Building code should be left up to local municipalities. They should decide what standards they want, whether it's energy standards or other standards, should be left up to them for their community. This shouldn't be something forced down from the federal government. They're the least able to do this in an efficient way.
Yeah, and I think that one of the points we made at the testimony was HUD's mission statement is to work toward affordable and attainable housing, and this completely flies in the face of that. And it seems like that's what's happening at every level of government right now. Is they know that affordable housing is a major issue. They know that they need to do something about it, but at the same time, they're making rules and regulations that just fly in the face of it.
Yeah. What would you say to other municipalities to maybe heed the warning of Kansas City here, or of the builders, at least in Kansas City, and the consumers, the buyers of these homes? What would you tell other communities how to be careful to make sure this doesn't happen to them?
I think the municipal policymakers need to get out and actually listen to their constituents and make sure they know all the facts before they make decisions. And like I said earlier, I think the people that are screaming the loudest are the environmental groups and others that, they're paying people to actually go to these city council meetings and voice their hopefulness that these codes will be passed. And then the everyday worker that has a job that's not in tune with what's going on in the city council and the municipalities isn't aware of what's going on. So I would tell the city leaders they need to get out and talk to their constituents and find out, what are their desires and their wants and their needs as far as housing goes, instead of listening to special interest groups and others that are pushing codes that make absolutely no sense to the everyday consumer that needs to buy them.
Shawn, that's great advice. And I would say, what about accepting federal money? I mean, do they need to be careful? Do cities and municipalities need to be very careful before accepting federal money to make sure that these kind of standards aren't tied to the federal funds that they might get?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think in most cases, I mean, I'm sure there's cases where accepting federal funds has proved to be beneficial, but I think in most cases, accepting federal monies or state monies often come with hooks to them. And those hooks are often more costly than the actual funds that will be received. I mean, that's the one thing I said in Kansas City, Missouri. If they would have, added up, even if they would have received these grant funds, if they would have added that up, they would have been much better off, either giving a rebate to a builder that is going to go to these energy codes or charging a small fee if you decide not to go to the energy codes. It would have had a much different effect on the affordability of the house, because the fees that they're charging the constituents through these new codes are so much bigger than the money they're actually getting back from the federal government. So yeah, the cities need to be fully aware of all the hooks and all the issues that are going to come in there. And, I think like most people understand, most of the time when the government's involved or the government has oversight of something, it functions much less efficiently than it could. So something you definitely want to stay away from if you can.
Yeah. Well, Shawn, thanks for sharing this topic with us. When I heard about this, I thought, a great example, an unfortunately great example of government sort of creating barriers to homeownership. And in this case, it's both the municipal government and the federal government that's doing it. But I really appreciate you taking the time to do this, and also for fighting on this issue. It's not just that you're fighting for your industry, you're actually fighting for your customers, right? The people who are going to own these homes someday. It's going to, this is an issue of affordability for them as well. So I don't know if you have any final comments on that.
No, I think that's, I have kids that are at the home buying age, and I fear for their friends and their generations to come that, they have got to get into home ownership to build that wealth. And so, yeah, I think that for us, we're passionate about home ownership in any way, shape, or form that we can get people into home ownership. So it's something that we're passionate about, and we think it, like I said earlier, makes communities much better to have homeowners. So that's something we're going to continue to fight for, and we appreciate the opportunity to be on here to just voice our concerns and share a little bit with you about it.
Sounds great, Shawn. Thanks again. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, look, this is another example of government created barriers. And, this is something, as you go buy a home, and if you're a first time home buyer, think about that. How much of the home that you're buying is because of government regulations, red tape, and administration that they force down your throats, and you don't even have a choice in the matter. And then more importantly, connect that to the people who are making these decisions for you, whether it's your local city council, your county commission, or whether it's your state legislators that are putting these rules and regulations on it, or if it's the United States Congress or the President of the United States through some administrative agency that is putting these additional barriers to your home ownership. You need to keep that in mind. You need to remember that. You need to hold them accountable for these bad decisions that they're making, because they're driving up the cost of living for you and the cost of the home for your family. I appreciate you joining us. Thanks for taking the time. And remember, you can always connect with us. We're always looking for ways to find more stories, help keep you inspired and informed. And the best way to stay connected to us is by liking and subscribing to our channel, as well as follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And if you know of a great story or someone that's working on expanding freedom and opportunity, somebody that we should share that story, be sure to go to our website, AmericanPotential.com, and fill out our Share Your Story section. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.